Hi, I'm Judith Leblein, and welcome to Conversations. Joining me today is Reverend Lisanne Finston from Elijah's Promise. And we're going to talk about hunger in America, hunger in New Jersey. And, I've been thinking about it since we scheduled this interview. And, hunger is relative for most of us, whether you're maybe on a diet, you're cutting out the carbs and you die for a piece of bread and your stomach grumbles, or maybe you missed a meal because of a business meeting and you think that's hunger. But the statistics in the United States of the number of people who are truly hungry, truly worried about their next meal are just astronomical. And to me, unbelievable. And we'd like to talk about hunger today. And we thank you so much for joining us, Reverend.
It's good to be here.
I went to your website, Elijah's Promise. You're in New Brunswick. You deal every day with this issue of hunger and poverty. And on that website, I found statistics that were just mind-boggling. 10% of U.S. households, people have to skip meals or eat less just to make ends meet. It just, you think of people, certainly we always, as children, thought about children in Appalachia. We're talking about our neighbors.
Yeah, that's right, Judith. Hunger, in many ways, we've made a shift in this country in terms of how we define hunger, because hunger in this country is really less about people who are starving and more about people who are what we call food insecure, people who have to skip meals regularly, have to make adjustments in the kinds of foods that they're eating because they don't have enough money, have to rely on emergency food sources on a regular basis in order to make ends meet. And the statistics are really startling. And when you look at not only the richest country in the world, but even in New Jersey, one of the richest places in this country, it's unbelievable that people are suffering and struggling the way they are.
Well, what I find very interesting is in the last 2 weeks especially, you're hearing all these reports about Americans dying of obesity. And obesity now is going to outrun heart disease and cancer as the #1 killer. So we all get focused on too much. Too much, biggie sizes and all this. And we've lost track of the fact that people are still hungry. And we all know that just in the last 2 years or so, post-September 11th, 2001, that the economy took a dip, some people have lost their jobs, but we have this perception that things are getting better. What are you saying at Elijah's Promise?
Well, we've seen just the opposite, actually. The numbers of people that we're serving, the numbers of meals we're serving, have increased over 10% in the last 2-3 years now since September 11th. And we're seeing that trend across the state between soup kitchens and food pantries that are servicing low-income folks, working poor, people on fixed income, seniors, people with disabilities. We've seen varying degrees of increase in levels of service from 5% to upwards of 40% in some places in the state. So what we've seen over these last few years is that the numbers of people who are struggling, and especially people who are working, the numbers of people who are working poor has increased dramatically. Not only because of the cost of housing, which ranks, I think, second most expensive in the nation, but people are just not able to find jobs that pay a living wage and provide them with enough resources to afford to live in the state of New Jersey.
And then you add with children, with health care and all those other expenses, as you say, just trying to make it to the end of the week. I can remember as a kid, on Friday nights, we always had either jumbote, which was sort of an Italian dish where you put macaroni and anything that was left in the fridge. Or Friday might be the night that you had fish, because fish in the 60s was cheap.
Right.
But now to eat well, it costs more.
Yeah.
I see it all the time, reading the labels, and, everybody's working on cholesterol and all. And the more healthy you are trying to eat, the more expensive.
And actually, when you mentioned obesity before, obesity is a symptom of poverty and of low-income folks, because the most cheap ingredients to prepare are, of course, pasta and rice, and tend to be, and junk food, unfortunately, and prepared foods are the cheapest and easiest to access, and those foods tend to be the most unhealthful in terms of obesity and weight production.
Well, I don't believe that I've ever been hungry like the people that you serve, but I can remember a time right out of college that the 4 for $1 macaroni and cheese boxes sustained me.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of diet that many of the people that you see have to try to stretch.
Absolutely. The reality is that the foods that are available through, and you know, I don't want to blame soup kitchens and food pantries for being a part of the problem, but the reality is that the foods that are available through food pantries and soup kitchens and through emergency food resources tend to be the foods that no one else can use or wants to use. So, for example, for a long time now, when you look at it, and even still today, if you look at the food bank lists of the foods that are donated in mass quantities that distributors and food companies are discarding, remember back when low fat was the trend as opposed to low carb? That'll be the next thing that we'll be filling the shelves. But when low fat was the trend and everything was, you know, the low fat with the green boxes, you can get low fat anything through the food bank. Low fat snacks, low fat crackers, low fat cookies. Junk food, frankly, snack foods, not the kinds of foods that we would like to be able to serve regularly at the soup kitchen. It's very hard to come by fresh produce and vegetables and meats and those kinds of things, but throwaway foods are readily available. Breads, bagels, all those kinds of things.
I think about seniors. And years ago, early in my career, I worked with the Office on Aging, and I can remember the distribution of the brick of cheese.
Right.
We have people, you know, in their elder years, you know, wanting a brick of cheese, which is the worst thing that we should do.
Right, and that government commodities program, which is still in effect, only now not servicing individuals, servicing food pantries and soup kitchens, is in many ways a lifeline for our organizations, but the kinds of foods that are available through even the government commodity program depend upon funding. And so right now, for example, there's no vegetables on this month's list and no fruits. And so we're struggling to figure out how we're going to be able to make sure that vegetables are part of our menu, because we want to make sure people get a nutritious meal.
And for the families that come to Elijah's Promise, you want to establish a learning process so that children understand that fruits and vegetables are where you should be headed.
An important part of every meal,
Yeah.
right.
Now, do me a favor, Reverend Finston. Tell me a profile. Can you give me a profile? Because I think an awful lot of people have this idea when they hear soup kitchen, and I know most people are generous when it comes to it. If you say, you know, people are hungry, can you make a contribution to soup kitchen? Most often people will at least throw in a buck. Okay. But I think there's still a stereotype of who's in there, you know, and I'll play it for you, you know, drug addicts, recovering alcoholics, street people, and tell me about the people that come to Elijah's Promise.
Well, it's hard to give you a profile because we do have those people, and we have a whole bunch of other kinds of people who walk through our doors every day. We have families with children, with 1 or 2 working parents who walk through our doors. We have senior citizens who walk through our doors. We have people with disabilities who walk through our doors, people with mental illness. People who are just families, individuals who are working and struggling to make ends meet. The reality is that 50% of the people who eat at the soup kitchen are working people. Every day they get up and they go to a job, and at the end of the day, they don't have enough money after they've paid their rent and their utilities to be able to afford food or to be able to afford adequate food. So we become not only an emergency food provider for people who are in a difficult time, but we become a supplemental provider for people who are, for a whole host of reasons, on fixed incomes or just unable to make ends meet.
Where I think that these statistics aren't true is there are so many people even depending on family members to feed them. And you know, this has happened in our own family. And you look around and you go, how could that be? You're out of cash for food. I'm out of cash. I mean, and so these numbers really don't show.
They don't
really
reflect. They don't really reflect the full breadth of the problem, and that's the case for housing. I mean, we talk about homelessness. The reality is, the numbers of people who are considered borderline homeless, or on the verge of being homeless, are people who are doubled up and tripled up and quadrupled up because they can't afford a place to live. I mean, how many parents, presumably middle class, upper middle class folks, have their adult kids moving back in with them because they can't afford a place to live? Poverty is not relegated to a segment of society anymore. Affording a good life affects everybody.
So how do you get to the word to the people that make the decisions about money when you're fighting a war, when you have crime in the streets, how do you make hunger front page?
Well, I think that's the challenge that all of us face, and we have hundreds of people who come out every day to volunteer their time to help at the soup kitchen, and thousands of people across the state who volunteer at a food pantry or a soup kitchen emergency food venue, and we're spending all of our time volunteering and doing good deeds. We don't have time left over to make our voice heard and to bring to the public's attention the issues and the problems, because the reality is that with a little bit of money, we can do a whole lot more. And there is actually a group in the state right now called the Anti-Hunger Leaders that's working to bring an ending hunger agenda before the state. We've met with state leaders and government and legislative officials, and we're working to try and present an agenda for change, and that's one piece of it. Another piece is educating people. The general community needs to be better educated about the issues. Hunger is a symptom.
How can New Jersey do better than they're doing now?
There's a lot of things we can do. We have a lot of people who are not making benefit of food stamps, which is a program that helps to supplement and support people. And we can do simple things like providing evening hours at the food stamp office so that people can access
Seems simple.
and apply. Absolutely. We can do simple things like make some regulation changes that make participation in child and senior feeding programs more readily available. We now have one of the worst participation rates in childhood nutrition programs in the country.
Really?
Because we make it so difficult for people to participate. You got to sign your life away in order to verify that you have a need. I'll give you a good example.
And that's school-based nutrition, the breakfast, the lunch.
We're in the process of discussing with a local child care facility now, providing meals for their child care facility. They had to go through a 3-day full-time training with the state in order to learn how to fill out the paperwork to participate in the program. So if you don't have the staff to send down to Trenton for 3 days, and if you don't fill out the paperwork perfectly in order to participate, it's just we make it very difficult for people to participate. And so there's simple things we can do that don't cost a lot of money that would actually bring more money into the state, federal dollars into the state, to support programs and projects that that help reduce hunger. So the answer is not necessarily throwing millions of dollars at the problem, although that would help too.
Yeah. Oh, it couldn't wait.
Yeah.
It couldn't wait. Now, I think it's an excellent point about getting advocates, because all the social service agencies, all the not-for-profits are already stretched as far as they can go. But, hunger may be the way you get people into your doors, but then these people that have other problems, how do we service them?
Yeah, I think that in the anti-hunger, anti-poverty, anti-homelessness field over the years, we've grown up a lot and realized that giving someone a meal or giving them a night in the shelter is not the answer to their problems, because homelessness, hunger are symptoms of a much broader array of concerns. And that we can do more. And I think that you'll find in Middlesex County and in New Jersey, there are a lot of organizations that are doing things differently. At Elijah's Promise, we've made some shifts in how we do business. So we don't just feed people, we also established social services on site. So when you come in to eat, you have access to health care, you have access to housing counseling, you have access to HIV prevention, you have access to a whole host of different resources that can help address your other concerns. We developed a culinary arts training program. So if you walk in our doors and you don't have a skill that's marketable to find a job, if you're interested in food and cooking and food service, we'll train you, and then we'll help you find a job. And so we've, I think, all grown up over the years to recognize that we can be a part of the solution by just simply taking a look at what resources we have available and ways we can help people a little more creatively.
It's not just an empty stomach, but until the stomach is full, can you solve any problem?
That's right. That's right.
We're talking about hunger today with Reverend Lisanne Finston from Elijah's Promise. The idea of homeless in New Jersey, in Middlesex County, in central New Jersey, so affluent. There are families that are homeless. There are adults that are homeless. There are couples that are homeless. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And where are they?
Well, if we had a good answer to that, there probably wouldn't be as many homeless people as there are. Two answers to that question. The first part of the answer is that we live in, as I mentioned earlier, one of the most expensive places to live in the country. The cost of housing, as anybody knows, whether you're a renter or a homeowner, has just skyrocketed.
Oh, sure.
So the cost, for a market rate apartment is out of reach for so many people. I think the statistic is in Middlesex County, it's over $1,000 for a 1-2 bedroom apartment. The actual earnings necessary to afford that apartment in this state is $40-some thousand. So you're looking at housing out of costs, or rather out of reach. And then you've got the problem of people who are doubling up, tripling up, as I mentioned earlier. So we have a really hard time measuring the depth and breadth of the problem to begin with. What we do know is that Middlesex County saw over this last decade, in the 90s, the largest increase in the number of poor people in the state. Quantitatively, 15,000 increase in poor people living under the poverty level in this county.
Because it's so expensive to live here.
Yep.
If you are one paycheck away from poverty, which I understand a huge amount of people are, one paycheck away, and the Ford plant closes.
Yep, exactly.
Or Revlon slows down.
Yep.
Or any of the pharmaceutical companies, they have a bad year with a new product, boom, you're gone. And if you've been living outside of your means, it's a very quick slide to poverty.
Yeah, absolutely. And so all of those factors combined, cost of housing, lower the lower wage jobs are leaving the area, so people can't find work to be able to meet their needs. We've seen just a tremendous increase in not only people on the streets, but people who are doubling up, tripling up with family and friends, and they're insecure. They may not be homeless, but they're housing insecure in such a way that at any given moment they're going to end up on the streets. The resources to help provide for not only month rent if you're in a crisis or an emergency, but that deposit, which is completely out of reach. There's just so many people that call and say, I need housing, I'm homeless, and there's nothing that anybody can do for them. The shelters are full. So we don't even know where a lot of these people are. We know that they get turned away more frequently in terms of any other service request in the county. We don't know where they are.
Oh, and when you take the landlord's position, you own a piece of property, all right? It costs you a lot in taxes. It costs you to upkeep it. You want the best price you can get.
Sure.
And you don't necessarily want 4 units of one family
right living in your place.
You know, so it's got to be frustrating.
Yeah.
How many years for you involved directly with hunger?
Well, I've been at Elijah's Promise 10 years now.
And what changes positive? What changes negatively?
I think what changes negatively is that the problem just keeps getting bigger in terms of the numbers of people, and the level of desperation is higher now than I've ever seen it before. What changes positively is that consistent with the growth is a growth in the level of people's concern. I mean, people are very generous with their time and with their resources.
It seems to be the one charity area, I believe, that people can really identify with if you've ever had a grumbling belly.
Yeah, well, it's immediate and it's obvious, and I think appeals to all of our consciences across any religious or moral line. Everybody has hunger as an agenda and an issue of concern.
But I imagine that you get tons of offers for food donations or help, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter. And then you got to stretch.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And we have a lot of educating and re-educating to do, and reframing of how we approach the problem in terms of our generosity. Not only to shift away from the sort of seasonal approach where we give everything during that holiday season and then sort of forget about it during the summer and other times. But we have to rethink, I think, how we approach the problem. An example is a number of years ago, the Home News did their usual holiday story on hunger, and I asked them to try and do something a little different and focus on a particular element of the problem. So they did a story on childhood hunger, and they focused on a woman and her kids who came to the soup kitchen. The story came out. I didn't even think about the fallout from that. We were deluged over the next 2 to 3 days with hundreds of people calling to, donate food and clothing and furniture. The outpouring of generosity was overwhelming. It was wonderful. But we didn't get one call to say, we've got a job opening at our facility, we'd like to interview this woman.
Or we have an apartment for her.
Or we've got, we understand that, her ill, critically ill child prevents her, from working, and that backup childcare is a problem, because that was in the story. We'd love to be
Isn't
a
that
backup
interesting?
childcare provider so
That's
that she can work.
People are free with food, freer with money than they are with opportunity.
And it just struck me, that experience, that we have such a shift to make as a society in terms of reframing our generosity. And so, now when I go out and speak to congregations and groups, I say, instead of doing a food drive, why don't you do a canned job drive? Everybody bring in a can with a label on it that has a job contact and a job opening information. Look at your employer and where you work. Are there job openings? Is there a contact name and number with some information of job? Let's get these guys in the shelters and women in the shelters a job.
Well, we all want to solve problems very quickly, and usually we think, doling out the cash is going to do it.
Yeah.
Now, for the pessimists that are watching our conversation, listening in on what we have to say, come on, Reverend, there's always going to be poor people. Come on, Reverend, there's always going to be hungry people. Those homeless people want to live out in the street. You could give them a house, they don't want to live in the house.
Well, my answer to that is that, yes, you're right. There are always going to be poor people, and there are always going to be hungry people, and there are always going to be homeless people, but not because of that answer, because of the nature of society and economies and how things function and operate. There are always going to be people that have needs. That's why we have a wonderful country, because to me, freedom and liberty is a wonderful thing, but one of the things I value most about this country is that we have a safety net and that we provide for the least of these among us in our communities. My goal is to get to the point where it's not the same people at the bottom all the time. My goal is to be in a kind of service industry and in a community where we're constantly working to lift people up and out and move them into a stable place. And then there may be people who fall down and fall, but let's pick them back up and get them on their feet and moving forward. And I think we can do that.
Well, let's qualify some of my questions. Is that I am a big fan of yours, a big fan of Elijah's Promise, as you know, and whenever possible I do what I can to help, because I've seen the success stories. I mean, you're not just filling people's bellies. With the Elijah's Promise catering and the education program that you have created chefs that are now working in fine restaurants.
That's right.
I mean, there can be successes.
Absolutely, and frankly, I wouldn't be able to do what I do anymore. I'd be burned out and long gone if success wasn't a daily part of what I see and experience every day at our facility. And it's really remarkable how easy it is to help people become stable and successful. It doesn't take a lot of resources to do that. Again, it takes a shift in our thinking and in our motivation to do that work.
Some of your successful students that have come into you homeless, jobless, and have gone on, I find it so amazing because they aren't the stereotypical story. They aren't the guy that's been, in the gutter, drinking from a lousy bottle of alcohol. This is a guy that was in construction, hurt his back, and before you know it, loses his house.
Right.
And then becomes a chef. I mean, I think the more people hear these things, the more they can intimately understand that it's you, it's me, it's my brother, it's my cousin.
Yeah, we have a woman right now in the program who's an immigrant, and she's looking to gain some skills so that she can get some footing in her new life here, and she's going to be fabulous, and she's going to take off because she's very talented and gifted and has a lot of motivation. We have a visually impaired student in our program right now. We have now students who are being referred to us by the New Jersey Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired. He's going to do his externship in a couple weeks at Panico's.
Oh.
I mean, this is a guy.
Fine restaurant in New Brunswick.
Fine restaurant, and this is a fabulous man who has all kinds of talent and motivation.
I'd go to have one of his meals, but I'm a little short on cash.
Well, you would never be able to eat there and enjoy it, but a lot of other people will be able to.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, and actually, one of our visually impaired, the first class that we had visually impaired students, one of the students who graduated was accepted into Johnson & Wales into their advanced standing program, and he's working now to finish up his degree. This is a dream. He never in a million years thought he would be doing and seeing his dream come true.
Oh, that's fabulous. Now let's take the few minutes we have left to try to maybe get you some cash, or get you some volunteers, or find people out there that have some jobs for people. Tell us how to find out more about Elijah's Promise in New Brunswick.
Okay, there's a couple of ways. One is to visit our website, elijahspromise.org. You can give us a call at 732-545-9002, or stop by. We're located at 18 Nielsen Street in New Brunswick. Our facility is open almost all the time. We're open every day of the week, every day of the year. We're never closed. And there's a lot going on with our agency right now. Really exciting things that are happening.
So who can help? Businesses can help?
Everybody can help.
Volunteers, organizations, groups?
Yep, groups, volunteers, organizations, from kids to seniors. There's something that anybody and everybody can do, whether it's actually coming out and volunteering at our facility, or doing a collection of food, or a collection of paper supplies, or a coin collection, and donating cash. There's so many different ways that people can be involved, and
some great events that I've had the opportunity to be at.
That's right.
Empty bowls, where
That's
you
right.
fill bowls with soup, and
That's right.
Your annual campaign, all those things people could get involved. Give us the number one more time.
It's 732-545-9002.
Well, I don't know how you do it, because your energy level is just through the roof.
Coffee helps.
Coffee helps.
Absolutely.
And for you, is this where you see yourself now for the rest of the career? What else would you like to do?
My vocation and my work is anti-poverty work, and once you get involved with seeing, learning and understanding people's lives and being a part of change in people's lives, there's just no way to give that up. It's just so exciting.
And you can't take a rich life to the bank, right?
No, that's right. I've heard that. I've heard that.
Much.
Thanks, Judith.
And there's nothing like a good conversation. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks. Good to be here.